Hey, Meg. Hey, friends.
So glad to be back. And we are excited to introduce you to a new friend of ours doing amazing ministry work. Her name is Tammy Dorsett. And we met at a conference in October of this year, 2024 of this year. And it is a ministry leader conference. And she actually showed up to our ministry booth bringing information about what she does. And we connected really quickly. And then we got to talk after that, after we got home from the conference. And she is doing amazing work. So I am so excited to introduce you to Tammy. Tammy, will you introduce yourself further? Tell us about your family and then give us a little bit of information about the ministry work that you're doing.
Sure. Yes, it's so good to see you. We've had a couple conversations since the conference, and it's just great to be here. I'm super honored that you would ask me to join you guys. But my name is Tammy. My husband's name is Matt. We've been married for 30 years, and we have 3 children, one that is about to be 28, and then we've got a 24-year-old and a 19-year-old. And about 3 years ago, we launched this ministry called The Gap at Sawmill Meadow, which is a gap year program, 9 months in length, located in South Fork, Colorado, with a mission to cultivate wholeness in new adults so that they launch into the world, whatever's next, thriving in purpose and responsibility.
Yes. Well, and we have a brochure here and it looks incredibly beautiful in Colorado, of course, right? We know that. And we're really excited and kind of the audience, which we are kind of talking to today is those who have students maybe that are in high school or approaching, later years in high school, or those emerging adults. So parents who are raising kids who are becoming adults, which they all are becoming adults. But anyway, we're going to talk a lot about that. So we're so excited to have that conversation.
Yeah, super excited. I think one of the, shortcomings with Empowered Homes, we spend a lot of time talking about like young child, discipline and, even the young adolescent year, but this gap emerging adult, we don't have a ton of resources. And so this was super intriguing for us to get on with you, Tammy. But the Gap at Sawmill Meadow was birthed out of your own family's experience. Kind of tell us some about that too.
Yes, Megan and I actually talked about the lack of resources available for parents and grandparents who are working with and shepherding new adults, emerging adults, whatever that terminology is. And we've spent a lot of time, my husband and I, just exploring like what should that look like, especially after the experience that we had with our older son. Our oldest son, who is almost 28, he graduated from high school in 2015, so this was well before COVID. And he graduated from Plano Senior High School and was a National Merit Commended Scholar, got accepted into Texas A&M and received quite a bit of scholarship money, actually, and went into the engineering program and went through his first 3 years and did okay. And as parents, we kind of attributed that to it's just a large school, like some of the things that a lot of parents attribute the transition to. They're not familiar with it. They're working it out. They're just practicing. His senior year of Texas A&M, he actually came home twice. The first time he withdrew from the university, and we got a call late one night from him telling us that he was on his way home and he was withdrawing from the university and he just couldn't deal with it anymore. And that was the first we had heard of any struggles. And so he spent a semester home working and working through some of the things that he needed to work through. And he went back to Texas A&M the following fall. And that was not a good decision. He was not ready to go back, and he ended up failing out his senior that semester, every single class. And we had no idea anything was wrong until we got a call from Student Services asking when the last time we saw him was. And that was extremely devastating and scary to authorize a well check on your student. when the university police go out and knock on the door. And fortunately, like he was there. And when he ended up coming home, he spent 2 years home. And in that 2 year time period, as he got plugged back into a church community, he shed some of the addictions that he developed in college. He sought some counseling, and he really took the time to figure out what he wanted, and came over one day and surprised us by telling us he was going back to Texas A&M. And I thought it was a joke because I didn't think they would let him back in, but they did. And he has since graduated. But during that 2 year period, as we started to share more about that experience with our church friends and our community and the people that we worked with, the more we realized this is not a unique situation. This happens, like new adults who are launching into the world, who are having to navigate so many new experiences and things, oftentimes aren't ready. And we decided, I was at a women's retreat and really praying through what does our next steps look like as empty nest couple. And we had already started thinking through what we were going to be doing. But I felt a clear prompting from the Holy Spirit saying, this is the direction that you need to go. And from that moment, I came home from that retreat and told my husband about it, and told him I thought I needed to quit to pursue building this. And he said, great. And I said, I mean, like tomorrow. And he said, do it. And so that's what I did. And then ever since then, it's just been a whirlwind of just meeting new people and just being in awe of who God has brought into the mix of this particular program, from the gappers that we've already hosted, the host couple that gave up their job to move there, and just a ton of experts that deal with and work with this generation. And it's just been really, really cool. It's also been the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's been really cool to see this just come to a reality.
Wow, that's so awesome.
Yeah. Well, and just in the way that only God can do, using our lives and our experiences, and a lot of times it's our pain and it's the hard things that He brings such beautiful opportunities for ministry and for the growth of His kingdom. And so for you to lean into that, and I love because in your emails back and forth, your signature is lean in, and
Yes.
and that's exactly what you have done, and it's just really neat to know. And what I'm excited about is we've talked about, the resources that y'all are developing and putting out for the students and for the emerging adults that are trying to grow, and then also working on really resourcing parents in helping prep their kids. And so I'm excited that you've sent me some stuff, and we have more resources coming out that are coming from the work that you're doing. And so we get to put resources into the hands of parents, and we'll attach all of that into this podcast. But let's kind of like step back a little bit to talk about a gap year. And I think it can get kind of a bad rap, right? And then I know there's some myths that kind of surround that. So if you can, Tammy, for us, kind of define what a gap year is, kind of who takes them, and then sort of address some of those myths that come with that stigma of gap year.
Yeah. So a gap year, there's actually a real definition of a gap year defined by the Gap Year Association, which we are a member of, but it is defined as an intentional period of time devoted to personal growth and exploration through experiential learning opportunities. And that sounds very fancy, but the word that we focus on is intentional. And I think the gap year concept maybe gets a bad rap for a few reasons. Number one, I think when I meet new adults out in the community, I'm always asking them what they're doing. And I came across this one guy one time, and he told me he was taking a gap year, and I said, "Ooh, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, I'm living at home and working." And I thought, interesting. Like, what is it that you're moving forward towards? And, when you think about the Webster definition of a gap, it's a space between two things. And if we don't have something on the other side of the gap, then it could be, a cliff that we're actually in the middle of and not even realizing it. And so I think a lot of people in their minds think that a gap year is a waste of time. Um, and certainly, depending on what you're choosing to do during that time, it can be. It can be a waste of time. And so that is probably one of the biggest myths associated with taking a gap year is that it is a waste of time and is delaying a career, whatever that career might possibly be. And that myth really is assuming that one is not working towards a goal. And so that's one of the biggest myths of a gap year. The other big myth is that it's expensive, and we may get into this later, but gap years can be expensive. And I think the other image that people conjure in their minds about a gap year is an emerging adult who tosses on a backpack, flies over to Europe, and backpacks across the Swiss Alps for 3 or 6 months, which that also could be considered a gap year, but that's also super expensive. And there are great things that can be learned from doing something like that, but that's not always attainable for everyone. And what is learned during that experience might be a little bit pigeonholed into a certain aspect of cultural awareness, which is great. But a gap year can be so much more than that. So that's another myth.
Yeah, I've always, think of a gap year as the movies and just the different stuff, whether you're going backpacking or you just go party for a year before you really want to settle in. And
Right.
so those are some of the myths about it. Tell us about the benefits of a gap year.
Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits. The Gap Year Association actually publishes alumni data, however you like to say it, on their website. And the benefits of taking a gap year, especially one that's intentional, which is their definition, are significant. And so 84% of gap year alumni report an increase in their academic motivation. So contrast that with somebody who's immediately leaving high school and experiencing a new academic environment for the first time in their lives, all while also trying to navigate being an adult. And so there's a lot of things that are playing into that emerging adult's life that are competing for attention. Another statistic that I think's relevant is that 81% of gap year alumni say that it influenced their career choice. And so when you look at the stats for the number of people and the number of times that people change majors when they do decide to go to college, and ultimately that's yielding a graduation rate of 62.2% of entering freshmen who are graduating from college within 6 years. And that's only 62%. That's significant. And so imagine if you had a host of new adults who knew what they wanted to do whenever they went to college or a trade school, and then that time wasn't wasted. 95% of them say that it prepared them for their transition to either education or work. And so the benefits statistically from those that have actually taken an intentional gap year are meaningful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I am floored because I didn't even know that there was a gap year association. I see that you're a member, and you said you're a member on there. That's incredible because I'm oh, I didn't realize or recognize. I knew that there are many emerging adults who do take a break or a gap or, before they decide to move on. But I didn't realize that they're running research and they're looking at these things. And those benefits to me make sense. I think of when I was going to go play softball in college, I decided to take the summer off. This is like vaguely similar, but I decided to take the summer off from playing softball so that I wasn't feeling burnt out. And I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, like how beautiful is that to look at a gap or look at that year or that time as a way of going, okay, I'm going to be intentional with moving towards something else. And, when we're talking about spiritually and all of those things, like really sitting with God and understanding what is he calling me to do rather than just rushing into something that maybe we feel pressure to go in and do. Right. And I think, I don't know if you've addressed this too, but, that stigma of like, if I don't go to this specific college that my parents think that I should go to, then I am not succeeding as a human being. There's all of that pressure. And so I love that there's so many benefits to a gap year, and that the work that you're doing is helping bring understanding to that it can be so good.
It's interesting about the Gap Year Association. There aren't a lot of faith-based gap year programs that are members of that organization. But I've found the membership and to be very, very beneficial and very welcoming to us as a faith-based gap year program. I was a little hesitant at first because, when you think about a gap year, a lot of times you think that's more of a secular thing to do. And again, a lot of like misconceptions about what a gap year is. But I have found it extremely beneficial and very welcoming and affirming to the mission of what we're trying to do in our particular program.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so talk about specifically just the benefits and the beauty of what you get to do at the Gap Sawmill Meadow. And so when young adults are walking in there, what does that look like? And then if you can talk about the cost, you touched on that a little bit, but talk about the cost, because I love how you lay that out in your brochure, the difference in the cost. Yeah.
So what we do at the Gap at Sawmill Meadow, if I had to put a tagline to our mission, it would be helping new adults practice how to be before deciding what to do. Mm-hmm. And if we can be super rooted, all of us as humans, and how we're going to approach the world as image bearers of Christ, and then decide what we're going to do, then everything else falls into place. But there's a lot of wrestling that's happening with this new adult, and I'm particularly talking about the 18 to 23-year-old emerging adult. There's a lot of wrestling with their faith, with who they are, with what they want to do, with their value in society. And many of them feel like they don't have a purpose. Many of them don't feel like they're deeply cared for by people that are around them. Many of them don't feel like somebody believes in them. And when you think about sending somebody off to their next step, and there's not rootedness in those areas, it just opens the door for them to have questions, which they're going to have anyway, but no place to turn. Mm. And so what we do at the Gap basically it's twofold. Number one, it's a discipleship program. And so we spend 9 months really understanding what does it mean to love God and love our neighbor as ourselves. So all of the content, our discipleship content that we're utilizing at the Gap is focused on how do you love God? How do you love your neighbor as yourself? And we always talk about love your neighbor as yourself. And that feels like 1, 2, 3. Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. But in reality, if you really break down that verse, what Jesus is saying is like the way that you love yourself should then overflow in how you love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. And so we spend a lot of time wrestling through, like, number one, let's love God first through prayer, through silence and solitude, through generosity, through hospitality, those types of things. And we utilize a lot of content from practicingtheway.org, along with several pastoral advisors that are coming in to help us wrestle through those things. So that's one component of the discipleship aspect of what we do at the Gap. The other thing that we do at the Gap is learn life skills. And so we learn them But we also know that everybody has heard these life skills for the most part before. We've all learned, like, oh, we should manage our money well. We've all heard, we should keep our spaces clean. But when we send our kids off to the next thing, have they really practiced that in an environment that's safe with guardrails? And so we provide information, but I think the secret sauce at the Gap is allowing the time and space for them to work that out and practice it in a group where they're all trying to wrestle through how to do that together. There's a lot of conflict. There's conflict resolution skills that are learned and practiced that sometimes aren't practiced in the home because, when it happens in the home, there's a lot of emotion involved, and there's not a lot of experience with what that looks like outside of the home. And so having a host couple that is there with the new adults all day, every day to kind of mentor them through all of these experiences, coupled with the mentors that we have paired up with them, is just really a beautiful recipe for them to feel cared for by people that are older than them, to understand that there are people who believe in them deeply, not that their parents don't, but it's different when you've got multiple other believers who are walking the walk, even though we might not be in total agreement all of the time. I don't think that there is a member of our first cohort that didn't feel deeply cared for during the time that they were there. And that translates to their next steps, whatever those steps are after the Gap.
Yeah, that's huge. The thinking through just, I'm having flashbacks of like my freshman year because I went straight into it, and I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, that would have been nice if someone would sit and talk to me about those things, and
Right.
oh yeah, that would have been good too. And I think about the parent listening right now of like, okay, man, that sounds awesome, but like, what's the goal? What's the target on the wall? Like, what does it actually look like for a student to take a gap year and end the program? Share with us maybe about maybe the first group you had, and then what are they doing now? Like, what's the, not return on investment, but what's the ROI
Yeah,
there?
yeah, totally. Let me start with the investment. So let me just talk about cost a little bit, and then
Yeah.
I would love to share about those that came into our program. So we had five in our first cohort. And I would say the cost of a 9 month, very intentional gap year program can be, it probably ranges from $15,000 to $40,000 for that time period. It's a huge investment. It was and it's not attainable to the majority of people. It was very important for my husband and I when we launched this nonprofit that it would be affordable and that there would be ownership of the new adults that were attending the program, of that cost. And so for our particular program, we require a $2,500 deposit or support raised donation from parents, grandparents. We don't really care. And then the majority, actually, the rest of it is covered by scholarship through donations, through our donors. And then we require every single person that comes and experiences our program to have a job in the community to help pay their way through the program. So, and that's part of budgeting and being financially literate and holding a job and making sure you're making enough money and getting enough hours to be able to pay your room and board and your bills every month that are looped in. And so it is attainable. We don't want anyone to be held back from our program that wants to attend. For those that did come, we saw a huge range of experience. So we had in our first year one that came directly out of high school. She attended a really large high school up in the DFW Metroplex, and she was our only one right out of high school. We had two that had gone to community college, so they had never lived outside of the home. They were attending a community college and working at the same time, and they both came to us and completed our program. We had one that went to a large private Christian university in Texas who didn't have a successful first year. She came to our program, and then we had one that attended a very large public university that didn't have a successful first year, and he came to our program. Um, we were a little nervous at first, thinking how would they interact, but they did beautifully. And all of them left the gap with a next step. So they're all either back in school, or one of them who came to us with an associate's degree already has a full-time job in an independent school district up in the North Texas area, working in the schools. And we had one that was really wrestling with his faith when he came into our program, wondering whether or not he even believed in Jesus anymore, but he knew that it was something that he wanted to explore.
Wow.
He also came into the program and said, I'm not going to college. College is not for me. He's one that is just on fire for Jesus right now. And he's also enrolled in college. And so just having the time and space to kind of wrestle through like pros and cons, benefits and risks, all of those types of things are super beneficial. And all of them at the end of the program said, you really haven't told us anything that our parents haven't already told us. It just hits different.
Yeah.
When you have a community of people around you that you trust and can help like spur each other on towards their next step.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And, speaking of parents and families, just thinking through some of those who are listening who they're approaching, right? Launching their adults and maybe they have some uncertainties or maybe they've never even considered that this could be an option. What advice would you give to them in order to sort of evaluate and figure out like, would this be something that could be beneficial for my young adult?
I would first start by saying you've got to have that conversation with them. We do have some resources on our website that kind of help people understand whether or not they're ready to adult. And this goes back to whatever's next. How confident are we as parents and how confident are we as emerging adults that we've got enough competency in the adulting life skills to successfully thrive in those areas in college or before leaving home, before sending them out. So is there a level of competence with that? I think the other thing too is I've been pouring through the Barna Impact 360 research for Generation Z, the most recent publication. And there's a ton of great advice in there as a resource. And I would highly recommend checking it out if you are a parent. But we've got to be curious with our new adults. We've got to move to a role of a coach with our new adults. And that's very disorienting. And when we think about, what's happening with our new adults who are launching or our emerging adults who are launching, that's very disorienting for them. We can't underestimate how disorienting that is for us as parents as well. Because, this is our first time to do that too. Mm-hmm. It's our first time to launch an emerging adult into the world. And I think overcoming some of the fears that we have with, feeling like they're going to be behind or they'll never go to college if they do this or that, and just changing our perspective with our children and asking more questions. And before we offer advice, ask them if they want it. I would say that's the biggest thing that I've learned with my 3 new adult children is asking a lot of questions and then asking if they want my advice and being okay when they say no. Mm-hmm. and then just secretly just jumping for joy when they say yes. Because that's a huge growth point in your relationship as you're launching your kid. Because we all want what's best for our new adults. That would be my advice.
Yeah, that's so good. And thinking I got a little time until my 7th grade boy is having those conversations, but he's already talking about, like, Dad, what do you think I should do? We were driving to school today. He's like, Dad, what if I'm a garbage man? Because we passed the garbage truck. It's like, man, you just better be the best garbage man out there. Like, just trying to talk through. He's already processing that. And I know a lot of parents, we have big hopes and dreams for our kids. And man, what you're doing is allowing for a space for those kids who are seeking and just exploring to have a safe place for them to grow. And it's okay if we don't have everything figured out. It's okay if we don't have this perfect plan for everything, and it's okay to invite God into that. And I think that's a huge thing that you guys are doing. So grateful for y'all's work. If we got listeners going, okay, I've got a sophomore, junior, or even a senior, like I'm really intrigued by this. How can people get a hold of you, get your information? What's the best way?
Yeah. The best way, really, so our email is info@leanintothegap.org. That goes directly to me.
Nice.
It doesn't go to some random person behind the info. But we have a website, leanintothegap.org. We're on socials. We have a YouTube channel. Through our website, if you really do have questions and just want to be curious about the Gap and whether or not it could be something for somebody that you love, we have a place on our website where you can just schedule a call directly with me. And so we want to make it as easy as possible for people to explore and ask questions. This is a different path that people need to have questions about whether or not this is the right path for their kid. And what we're finding is that we have to have multiple conversations with the shepherds of the new adults to understand exactly what's going to happen at the Gap, and then with those new adults and their parents to understand whether or not this could be a right thing for their kid. And so I would say our website, you can connect with me through your website, of course, my email too. And we're on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn and all of those things.
Yeah, I love that. I love, that you're available even though for those conversations. That's a lot of organizations, they're real hands off, or there's a little distance, but to be available and like, hey, I'll get on the phone and we'll talk through all the questions you have. Like, just that speaks about your character and how much you love what you're doing, and just grateful for everything that you guys are doing, and I'm just excited to know that there's something like this out there for our kids and for those new adults. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and ministry leaders that are listening, this is a great resource to get in the hands of your parents and your students if you're in student ministry, or, so there's just so many ways in which getting the word out about this is just going to be so powerful. So we want to help you do that in every way that we can. Like I said, we are going to have some of your resources and resources that hopefully we collaborate on in the future that we're going to be launching on Empowered Homes also. So that will point towards the Gap at Sawmill Meadow, and hopefully people will reach out and take advantage of this beautiful program. I know I want to go to the Gap at Sawmill Meadow. I'm ready.
Yeah, let's go.
You're welcome to.
Tammy,
thank you so much.
Yeah, Tammy,
Meg and
thank you
Bobby.
so much for your time today, and just can't wait to see how God continues to grow and expand what you're doing, and hopefully we can play a small part. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've loved it. Thanks
you.
for being curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.